what really happened to the princes in the tower. Many years ago, back in the 1980s, I was commissioned by a film company to research and write a script about King Richard III and his two nephews, known as the Princes in the Tower. I had just written a successful BBC TV series that was set in the modern day, as it was then, so a historical commission was unusual and a challenge that I was more than ready for. I took 6 months to research the subject, and there seemed, to me, to be more questions than answers. The first consideration that struck me was the element that a great number of suppositions were treated as fact when they were exactly that, suppositions. My research took me to Tewkesbury Abbey, where I was shown, in the crypt, a jumble of bones in a glass case that was alleged to be the remains of King Richard's brother, George, Duke of Clarence. The important word here is alleged. I was informed that the male skeleton consisted of most of the leg and hip bone, the upper left arm, the left shoulder, and the upper part of the skull. I was sceptical as to whether these truly were bits of Clarence, even though it was presented to me as a fact. Similarly, the young son of King Henry VI is said to be buried at Tewkesbury Abbey, a brass plate on the floor in the choir, marking the grave of the only Prince of Wales ever to die in battle. I was informed by the then vicar of Tewkesbury Abbey that an excavation had been made under this brass plate and no remains had been found. This set me to furiously thinking, if these alleged facts were so dodgy, then the alleged fact that Richard III had murdered his two nephews might also be unreliable. The 1980s were a time of innocence before the internet and its vast resources, certainly decades before the skeleton of Richard III was discovered by Philippa Langley and the University of Leicester. I was aware of the Richard III Society and their stance that King Richard was not a hunchback, scoliosis since proved wrong, and that he was as innocent as the white snow of the murder of his nephews. I didn't believe that either, but I didn't disbelieve it. There is no doubt in my mind that the three York brothers, they being King Edward IV, the aforementioned George, Duke of Clarence and King Richard III, were a murderous bunch. This was only to be expected in those bloody times when kill or be killed seemed to be the order of the day. I was certain that good King Richard was more than capable of bumping off the inconvenience of the two boys. But there appeared, at least to me, that there was no need for it, and it seemed not to be consistent with his previous behaviour and character. True, he was ruthless in battle, and more than likely had a hand in, shall we say, removing the embarrassment to the Yorkist cause that was the doddering King Henry VI. But that had been necessary and expedient. Murdering the kids was neither of these two. Neither did I believe that Henry Tudor's mother, Lady Margaret Beaufort, or the other supposed villain of the piece, the Duke of Buckingham, arranged the deaths of the boys. The problem of access seemed to be insurmountable, and I felt that, had this been the case, King Richard III would have shouted it from the rafters. He didn't. So I decided they hadn't. I ruled them out. Then who, and equally importantly, why? And why did the two boys appear to disappear as early as August in 1483 when they were in the charge of Richard III and nobody else? If the princes were alive when Richard was being accused of their murder, why the hell didn't he produce them to shut his accusers up? There had to be a reason. It could be that he had bumped them off, or perhaps there was another reason. Apologies to Miss Langley, who I hold in great admiration, but I didn't believe they were spirited out of the country either. Similarly, I found it hard to believe that either Lambert Simnel or the more convincing Perkin Warbeck were anything more than pretenders. Politically useful for the disaffected Yorkist remnant, but still nothing more than that. Pretenders. Gradually, a possible solution wormed its way into my consciousness. We will never know the truth of the matter with 100% certainty. Too much time has passed, and even if the alleged, that word again, bones of the princes were found to be truly the remains of Edward and Richard, which I doubt. This would lead us no further in our search for who it was that ordered them to be killed. I did what any good dramatist, and presumably any good historian, would do. I went back to the source documents, looked at the behaviour of those around the boys at the time of 1483, and once again asked myself the question, who benefited? Also, why did King Richard take control of first Edward and later Richard? Why this brutal act? The answer seemed obvious to me: self-preservation. It is more than obvious that the boy's mother, Elizabeth Woodville, and Richard hated the sight of one another. The reasons for this are complex and go back to the time of King Edward IV's marriage to the woman. It was a simple matter that had not Richard moved with the speed that he did, then he would have been the one who was bumped off by the very powerful Woodville faction. So grab the kids before you are grabbed. Okay, I know you're saying, stop faffing around and tell us exactly what happened to the two princes in the tower, and who do you think did the bumping off? Well, life isn't that simple, but I will reveal it, I promise you, in this series of videos, both as my analysis and dramatically as I recount the conclusions and production that I wrote all those years ago.
If you've enjoyed this spooky tale, please subscribe, like, and ring the bell for more.